Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I wanted to say hello and thank you so much for joining us for this morning's meeting of the Western Mass Historical Commission Coalition and the Central Mass Historical Commission Coalition. Please note that today's meeting is being recorded and it will be available online. As people come in and people who are already here, as a general housekeeping note, please mute yourself. I believe your cameras are already turned off, but if you could just please make sure that you're muted, as this will be recorded and we don't want any background noise as a distraction. If you have any questions during the meeting, you can type them in the chat box and we will try to address them at the end after Anne-Marie's presentation if they already have not been answered. Questions related to archaeology will not be addressed today, but please still submit them and they will be directed to the appropriate staff at MHC and answered at a later time. So you can still feel free to type them in the chat box. The Western Mass Historical Commission Coalition was organized in 2014, meets 2 to 3 times each year, and offers opportunities for members of local historical commissions and other historic preservation planners and advocates to network with colleagues and explore current challenges and successes in the field. Meeting locations were traditionally rotated within Western Mass, but since 2020 have been held virtually, which has also allowed us to attract attendees from outside of our region. The Coalition Steering Committee includes Beth Giannini with the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, Laura Brennan with the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission, Chris Skelly from the Massachusetts Historical Commission, Stacia Kaplanson from Preservation Massachusetts, and Shannon Walsh, that's me, from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. The Central Mass Historical Commission Coalition was organized in 2018 based off of the successful model of the Western Mass Historical Commission Coalition. Steering committee members for that group include Trish Settles and Carrie Salwa of the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, Glenn Eaton and John Hume of the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, Devin Kurtz of the Blackstone River Valley National Heritage Corridor, Chris Skelly of MHC, and Stacia Kaplanson of Preservation Mass. The Preservation Mass website hosts archives of both groups' past presentations, as well as recordings of recent virtual meetings. That is where today's meeting recording can be accessed as well. We would like to thank Preservation Mass Associate Director Erin Kelly for helping us to provide this meeting through their GoToMeeting platform. Today's meeting topic is an introduction to MACRIS Maps presented by Anne-Marie Gundel, who is the GIS manager for the Massachusetts Historical Commission. She received her MA in anthropology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and her BA in anthropology and art history from Fordham University. Anne-Marie has experience in data management, geospatial analysis, and mapping at a local, state, and national level. As the GIS manager for the MHC, Anne-Marie is responsible for the development and maintenance of the MHC's spatial data. She also maintains MACRIS Maps, which is the MHC's web mapping application. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Anne-Marie.
Great, thanks so much for that introduction. I'm looking forward to introducing the basics of MACRIS Maps and sharing tips on how to utilize our data for historic preservation planning activities. And there we go. So a very brief introduction for MACRIS and MACRIS Maps. They are two separate websites. MACRIS, for anyone not familiar with it, is the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System, and it's a database with data compiled from a variety of records and files maintained by the MHC, including but not limited to the inventory of historic assets of the Commonwealth, National Register of Historic Places, State Register of Historic Places listings, and local historic district study reports. So this includes information on above ground historic inventory in Massachusetts, such as buildings, cemeteries, structures, and historic districts. And you can see MACRIS and MACRIS Maps are two separate websites, and the links for each are listed below. So MACRIS Maps is a supplement to the MACRIS database. It's an online mapping application that allows users to search the MACRIS database by location for information on the state's documented cultural resources. And this past summer, we updated MACRIS Maps with an entirely new look and somewhat different operation and workflow. So I'll begin today with a walkthrough of the website. All right, so the first thing you'll see is our welcome and terms of agreement. And the thing that I like to emphasize here is that absence of data for a location in MACRIS Maps doesn't necessarily imply a lack of historic resource. It just indicates that the information for that location is not presently on file with the MHC. And so this is MACRIS Maps, and I'm going to start off with an overview of where things are located on the screen, just to familiarize folks with the user interface. And then after that, I'm going to move into a few examples of how people might use MACRIS Maps in their workflow. So to start off, the most important part is the map itself. And you'll see it opens at what we call 0% zoom, which is the furthest out that you can zoom, and you'll see the entire state of Massachusetts. And if you want to move on the map, you have a few options for zooming. In the top right corner of the map, you can zoom in or zoom out with the plus and minus sign. You also have the option of zooming a little more quickly with this scroll. And so you can click anywhere on here and it will zoom in. The top of the scroll is the furthest in that you can zoom in a town, and the bottom is back to that 0% full state view. What I like to do, which is easiest for me, is on my mouse with the scroll. You can also use your mouse to scroll in and out. And so the different layers on MACRIS Maps will appear at different zoom levels. So we offer two different layers of MHC information. We have the inventory areas, and those appear at 40% zoom. You can see them here on the map. And then we also have the inventory points, which are those buildings, structures, and cemeteries, and those will appear at 50%. And then for the points, the labels will appear at 90% zoom. So if you're a little bit zoomed out and you want to know what the labels are for those points, just go ahead and zoom in a little bit more and you'll be able to see them there. If you are interested in moving the map around, all you have to do is click and drag, and that will navigate you around the screen. And if you're interested in a certain feature, you'll notice that the mouse will highlight what you're hovering over. So the points get a halo around them, and the areas of interest will change color and get a dotted outline. The last thing that I want to point out on the map itself is in the bottom right corner, we have scales available in both feet and meters, as well as attribution links. So as you'll see as we go through, there are a few different layers that we offer. There's base layers and overlay layers that help you put the MHC information in context. And if you have any questions about those, a lot of them we have access to through MassGIS. And so there'll be a link down here that you can follow to get more information on those layers. So moving up to the top bar, there's also quite a bit of navigation and ways to kind of personalize your experience on MACRIS Maps up here. And first things first is if you already know exactly what you're looking for, you know that you have the MHC ID number, you can type it in here. And it's not case sensitive, so I'll use an example first. You don't have to do all capital letters. You can do lowercase letters. And the search will take you to the resource that you're looking for. And you'll notice that more information has popped up. On the left-hand side, we have a details panel, and on the bottom is what we refer to as the grid. And I'll cover this in more detail later on in the presentation. The thing I want to highlight right now is that once you do your search, it will pull the information and it will also highlight your search on the map. So in this case, that halo is around the resource of interest. Also in the top bar, if you want to clear your selection, you'll press this X. And there are quite a few buttons in the top bar. So to assist you, if you hover over the button, you'll get some text to let you know what it's going to do. And next to the clear selected features, we have this button with Massachusetts, and that will reset your session. So that'll bring you right back to where you started. So if you're looking and you don't know exactly the number or the ID that you're looking for, but you do know, say you're interested in, you can use this drop-down menu to automatically zoom to that town. So it'll take you straight to Adams. If you're looking for a town that's further down the alphabet, you don't have to scroll all the way. If you start typing, it will take you down the list, and then you just have to either click with your mouse or press enter, and it will take you to where you want to go. This collection of buttons here will help you personalize your viewing experience. So you can show and hide that details panel that appeared earlier with the search. There's also a grid feature here. You can show and hide. And if while you're browsing, you want the full screen to be your map view, you can also hide that tools panel. And then the entire screen will be a map view for you. We also have the map legends, and this I will get into more detail later on as well, because it's very helpful. It explains the different colors on the map, and the colors are related to the designation. So we can review that further, but that information is up here under map legend. We also have code keys. So we note the designations, but they're often abbreviated. So this just explains those abbreviations. And then we offer a pretty detailed help document. So if after this presentation you have any questions, I recommend stopping here first just to go through and see what we have explained. There's a link if you are interested. If it's easier than scrolling through here, you can download as a PDF from this link.
Sorry to interrupt, Anne Marie. If everyone could please just make sure that you're muted, just because we hear a lot of feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the last thing to note in the top bar is in the About section, we note the last time that the maps data was updated. So we typically update every 4 to 6 weeks, pending data entry. So if you're curious about how recent the data is, you'll just find it right here. And then we also have this right panel, and this is where most of the tools will be located. So there's an address search, additional tools for selecting and navigating the map, and then the layers. And this is the thing I want to focus on right now. We have base layers, and these are the layers that appear at the bottommost layer of the map. So we have some options. We have OpenStreetMaps. We have a lot of options from MassGIS, so there'll be color imagery and aerial imagery for a variety of years, which is great. There's also the option to have LiDAR imagery, which is really helpful. You have the option of turning on and off if things are very crowded and you want to be able to see what districts are here. You're not so concerned with the points. You can hide them and turn them on and off. So you have some flexibility with what you're seeing. And we also offer overlay layers, and there are quite a few, so I'm not going to go through all of them. I can definitely answer questions in more detail at the end if anyone is interested in them, but some popular options are assessor parcels, and we also have land use and soils, and we also have building structures, which is new, which is very exciting. So those options are there, so you can kind of take the MHC data that we offer and put it in additional context, which can be very helpful. And so this is pretty much the overview of where things are located. But the best way to actually learn about MACRIS Maps is to just dive in and start using it. So I'm going to return to search by ID. And you'll notice now I'm using capital letters. Capital, not capital, it's going to take you to this first resource in Abington. And so you do your search, it highlights on the map, and you have your details panel here on the left. And the first thing that you'll see is if we have a photo and an image for that resource, it will appear right here. And then below that is a link, and if you click this link, it takes you to the MACRIS database. And this is where, if you wanted more information, you are able to download the inventory form if it's available as a PDF, or if this was a National Register property, you could download the National Register nomination if it's available as a PDF here. And then the details will provide the same information. This is pulling from the MACRIS database, so it'll be the same information as is in MACRIS. There's also some really helpful navigational buttons in the details panel. And so say I found this resource, this is what I'm interested in, but what else is it close to in Abington? I can pan around the map and see, okay, it's near this district, it's around here, but then I want to go back to where I was. If you click the center button in the details panel, it'll take you right back there. And then say I wanted to know where in Abington is this? Is it north? Is it south? And you're zooming out and you lose track of where it was. You can center and zoom. It takes you right back to your selection. The other option in the details panel is Street View. And this will open a new tab and just take you right to Google Street View. And so this is your property. I will say that sometimes Google does not have Street View, and so it will still open this tab, but if there's no imagery, it'll appear as a black screen. So another option is you're not sure exactly what your ID is, but you want to search by town and do a browse. You can go to Adams, you can kind of look around. You can pull up that map legend. And this is where you can kind of start to really get to know the town that you're looking at. You can see what areas have been inventoried and what haven't. There's a whole blank space over here, but close to the road, there's been a lot of surveys and inventory done. So you kind of have an idea of what's there, what's not there. You can also look by color. You'll see a lot of inventoried properties. And over here, we have a National Register district, and the properties within them will appear as red to indicate they're on the National Register. If you want to go not just by neighborhood, but you know exactly the address you're looking for, you can come over here in the address bar, and you'll want to put your street address in the top line and then the town in the bottom. And you can either press enter or click search. And this was a very specific address. So it tells you exactly, here's the address you're looking for. You'll click it and it'll put a little pin at the address that you're interested in. But say for some reason, I knew it was 37 Plymouth Street, but I didn't know what town I wanted. This is pretty smart. It will give you some best guesses. It says, okay, there's a 37 Plymouth Street in Brockton, but actually we wanted the one in Marlborough. It'll take you right there. To clear your pin on the map, you're going to have to click this button to clear it. The other thing is that you have the option of searching by landmark. We can't guarantee that every landmark is going to appear, but many of the very large ones and popular ones will be there. Or say Mount Greylock, gonna find it. And you have the option again here of looking at your address through a street view. And so sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. This one actually does have a street view for the top of Mount Greylock. In addition to the address search, we also have the tools panel here. And so say you're looking at a town, we have Amherst here, and you want to have a little bit more control over how you're zooming in on the map. We have options here. If you know exactly the coordinates of the location you're interested in, you can type them in here and zoom. Or if you want, you can say I'm interested in this section over here, click and drag, and that pinpoints exactly the area of interest, and it'll zoom in on the map. And so now that I'm here, say I'm in Amherst, I want to know about the resources around Pelham Road. You have a few different options. You can select your features the same way that you were when you first open MACRIS Maps. This is the default, the select by click. So I'm interested in this resource or this one here, and this is where the halo around the points or the highlighting of the areas comes in, so you know what you're looking at. But say I'm interested in actually more of the entire area around Pelham Road. You can select features by box, circle, or polygon. So if I click once and then drag and then click again, that will pull up my entire search of everything within the area that I delineated. And one thing that is important to note is that once you're in this select features, you can't browse around the map unless you hit pan map. It kind of freezes. And so if you want to keep your selection on the map, but kind of look around to see what else is there, you want to make sure that you hit that pan map. And doing a selection of multiple resources pulls up the grid with a little bit more information than we had with just one resource. So you'll see it separates the information into the two layers. We have our inventory points and our inventory areas. And the areas are the districts. Then you have your points. And what's great about the grid is that you can select each one and it's going to change, it's going to highlight on the map what your selection is. So you can track it. So you have 55 items in your selection, but you'll know exactly which one you're looking at as you're searching. And say in this one, there's a lot of points right there from far out. It's kind of hard to see what you're looking for. You can use that center zoom in the details and it'll bring you right in. So then you'll know what you're looking at. And same thing for your areas. It will highlight which one you're looking at on the map. If for some reason you were looking for all the resources within a half mile of this intersection, you can either pull until this note on the map says a half mile, and that's going to select all those resources for you. Or to make it a little easier for everyone, you can click this box here and point out where you want to go. So for example, right there. And so you're clicking and indicating I'm sorry, can everyone else hear that feedback?
Yes. Ronald Bernard, could you please mute?
Okay, is that better? Yes, perfect.
I think we should wait. This is Chris Skelly calling. I think we should wait. Okay, Ron is muted now. Great, we're set.
Okay, great. Yeah, so with the select by radius, you can specify your radius. You click, it tells you everything within the set amount that you had said. You can also select by polygon. So say for some reason I needed to know exactly what's within this triangle, it will tell you. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to do your search, depending on the location, the area, the neighborhood, if you have exact boundaries. In some cases, you could pull up, if you're interested and you knew exactly what your assessor parcels were, you can trace them out and with the select by polygon. Sometimes, since this information is being imported from MassGIS, it's a lot of information, so it will take a few minutes to load, but just have patience, it will eventually appear. And then the last thing that I wanted to review before we open to questions is returning to the designation information. And MACRIS Maps can be incredibly helpful for folks because we have all this data in MACRIS, but this helps visualize where things are on the map in relation to other things. And also you have a better idea of the different boundaries of districts. So for example, looking in Amherst here, we have the North Prospect, Lincoln, Sunset, LHD. And you can see the boundaries of that and how they overlap with 2 National Register districts. And so you have the option of kind of understanding where things overlap, where they don't. And you can see we do call attention to overlap between National Register and local historic district locations. LHDs are these green triangles when they are just a part of a local historic district. But then resources that are on the National Register are just red circles. But if they're both, they'll be represented as an upside down red triangle. So it's nice to have the legend up as you work through. If it's something that you're not as familiar with, you can kind of work through. Also, I want to call attention to something that's new in the most recent version of MACRIS Maps. We now indicate Massachusetts historic landmarks. So I know we have some in Pelham. So you'll see those gray X's will represent the Massachusetts historic landmarks. And then another thing to know about designations is just because it says this is a preservation restriction, it doesn't mean that it's only a preservation restriction. There's a hierarchy to the way that they're displayed on the map. And so preservation restrictions will always appear, if there's a preservation restriction and it's noted in MACRIS, it will appear as such on MACRIS Maps. And then the next step is a Massachusetts historic landmark. So as you'll see here, I selected this preservation restriction, but if you come and look at the designation data, it's a preservation restriction, a Massachusetts historic landmark, and a National Register district, or within a National Register district. So just be aware of this as you're using MACRIS Maps, that you want to pull up the details to get the full information on designation information. And then I also just like to end with a few helpful hints. And so one of the things is that if for some reason a number got skipped or we don't have it in MACRIS, you will get a warning. So ABI.2 does not exist. And so you will see this pop up that the resource is not available. There are also some instances where there will be a resource in MACRIS that is not mapped in MACRIS Maps. And if this is the case, you'll see in the details panel that there are no coordinates available for this feature. Also going to return to Amherst. So in certain cases, there will be areas that overlap one another. So looking again at this local historic district and the 2 National Register districts, you'll see that in order to select one of these to get these to highlight, I have to go south of the border of the LHD. So basically the LHD layer is overlapping it. So if I try and click with just the single click, I'm not going to be able to access this information. This is just part of the nature of the overlapping GIS layers. But the way to work around this, in some cases, you won't have the option of selecting down here to access these. The way to get information on them is to use select by box, circle, or polygon. And then that way, down here, you'll be able to sort through all the options. So just if there's ever a time where you're frustrated, you feel like you're trying to select something and it's just not working out for you, go away from the select from click and use box, circle, or polygon, and you'll be able to access that information. And then our last item is that I know some folks really like to use Google Hybrid. And so we do not offer Google Hybrid, but if you choose ortho imagery, and then you turn street names on in the overlays, this gives you the option of having that aerial imagery while still getting street level information. And so I know that was a lot of information to take in at one time. So I can answer questions. I do, before I open it up, want to emphasize that I work on the technical aspects of MACRIS Maps. So I will be able to answer any questions you have on how to use MACRIS Maps. Some questions regarding MACRIS or surveys I may not be able to answer, but I can try and direct to the appropriate staff at MHC.
Great. This is Shannon Walsh from PVPC. Anne Marie, that was amazing. I've been using MACRIS Maps for a while, and I don't think I knew how to use about 90% of what you talked about. So thank you for that really wonderful presentation. I'm going to start with some questions that I'm seeing pop up in the chat.
Sure.
The first easy one to answer was a question about posting a recording of this presentation, and that will be hosted through the Preservation Massachusetts website after it's all downloaded and everything. So everyone here should be able to rewatch it, and people who did not have a chance to attend today, they can watch it that way as well. Okay, I'm going to go up to the top of the questions that were submitted today. Can you talk a bit more about how to find and use LiDAR imagery in MACRIS? And this is related to the possible, to mapping stone walls and possibly using LiDAR as a resource.
Sure. So to access the layer that we currently have available, you're going to go to Layers and Base Layers, and we have the shaded relief from 2005, as well as in color shaded relief in 2005. MassGIS, obviously imagery has dramatically improved in 15 years. So we are working on getting the most recent LiDAR imagery to appear in MACRIS Maps. We're just kind of waiting on MassGIS to finalize how they're going to kind of serve that information out to folks. But once we have access to that, we're going to be adding that updated information, and then that will be great because there will be much more detailed information to be able to look for things like stone walls.
Great. Okay, another question is there a way to export a map from the screen to a PDF vector style map? In other words, not just a screen grab.
No, there is not. The best way to get an image would either be a screen grab, or if you do print to PDF, I will say that if you hide the tools panel, it makes printing easier, but we don't have an official print layout.
Okay, another question is, what is the average time it takes for a submitted survey form to be entered in MACRIS and then to make it to MACRIS Maps?
Sure. So typically the new forms and photographs for properties take about 6 to 18 months. We get a lot of submissions, but once it gets entered into MACRIS and makes its way down to the GIS lab, we typically are able to enter them within a month or two. So within that timeline of 6 to 18 months after being submitted.
Okay. And I just had some questions as well. And people, please feel free to keep typing questions in the chat box if you had any other questions, including those related to archaeology, and we could try to answer them later. Did you say that there are links to studies through MACRIS Maps as well, like a way to, did I hear that correctly?
What types of studies?
If I thought you said maybe if there was like a local historic district study or something related, did they show up?
Just that you are able to access the information out of MACRIS, which can include local historic district information, but it's whatever is available through MACRIS.
Okay, gotcha. And do you know of any other states that have this type of MACRIS database and MACRIS Maps?
Yes, quite a few states do. Off the top of my head, I know that Washington and New Jersey have it. I believe that Connecticut is beginning to develop one, but doesn't have it quite yet. New York has one, but since every state has different guidelines, some are available to the public, some are behind a user account wall, so you have to contact and meet a certain level of standard to access any of the data. But if you search state SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, and then GIS in Google Maps, you can actually pull up a list of all of you. There's not a condensed list, but the Google search results will include many of the states that have systems like this.
Okay, well, I really appreciate, I didn't realize until I started looking in other states that not all states have this public access to information that Massachusetts does, so it's appreciated. Okay, we have a question. We have an archaeological question that we will get an answer to after the meeting, but we have another one about aerial imagery. Do you know if aerial imagery from early in the 1900s is going to be added to base layers?
We do not have any immediate plans to add that information. However, if it is available, it's something that we can consider in the long run, but I wouldn't say anything in the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay, and if, as far as preservation restrictions, it's probably maybe similar to your response about studies. If a preservation restriction is linked to MACRIS, that also could potentially be accessed through MACRIS Maps?
It depends on whether or not that preservation restriction information is included in the inventory form.
Okay.
Pretty much any information deeper than location that you want to get would have to already be in MACRIS. This is kind of just another way to access that information.
Okay. And can you recommend some creative ways to use MACRIS Maps for planning purposes, or maybe things that you've seen communities do?
It's a very good question. I think that one of the most helpful things about MACRIS is that visual, or MACRIS Maps is that visual element. So I think it's really helpful for communities to get an idea of what's been surveyed, what areas could possibly use more survey, or some towns haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of survey. So for example, you can see East Brookfield has a very limited amount of information, but the surrounding towns have much more survey completed. So it kind of gives folks an idea of what opportunities there are, especially if they're really familiar with the historical context of their town, to say like, I know that actually there's a massive amount of historic properties here that we should definitely take a look at. It's been outside, you know, the period of significance that we've looked at so far, but this should be our new focus. Whereas like, this is a known area that we've kind of surveyed a lot. And so just having that knowledge that just because something's not indicated in MACRIS Maps doesn't mean that there's not something there to investigate.
Great point. Okay, we have another question. Can you print a map other than screenshot?
No, you cannot.
Okay, and then that's a good point you brought up about the visual impact of seeing how an area might not have all the dots and how it could present an opportunity rather than indicating that there's not anything there worthy of documentation.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes get notices internally about updates to the state GIS system. Is there a way that does MACRIS Maps send out information when there are updates? Like you mentioned, there might be some updated LiDAR imagery available.
Yeah, if folks are interested, I do have a listserv that I send out to let folks know that we've added additional information on new towns, or if we're going to do a massive update, or if for some reason we're doing maintenance and MACRIS Maps will be down for an hour or two. I do send that information out. So I have my email address here. If folks are interested, they can send me an email and I can add them to that mailing list.
Oh, okay, that's great. That is very helpful. Is there anything else you want to add, Anne Marie, and maybe anything that we don't, that we should be asking you that we're not thinking to ask?
No, I think that we covered a lot. I will say that there is a lot going on, and I know MACRIS Maps can sometimes seem a little daunting for new users, but definitely take advantage of the help document. I think we tried to make it pretty detailed, so if folks have questions, they can look there. But if something comes up and you're having a lot of trouble or you're looking to do a certain thing with the maps, definitely shoot me an email and I'm happy to see if I can assist.
Wonderful. Well, this was, oh wait, here we have another question. Is data about sites that have received MPPF and other MHC grant funding available in MACRIS Maps, or is this something that you're considering adding?
So at present, we don't offer that information. That's a bit outside the realm of what I do at MHC. So that would be more of a question for preservation planning, but I could always pass that along.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Anne Marie, for this presentation. It was really helpful, and I think it will, if anybody has questions afterwards, please feel free to email me directly, swalsh@pvpc.org, and I'll make sure that the questions get passed on. Our next Western Mass Historical Commission Coalition meeting will be held this spring or during the summer and will most likely be virtual still. If you would like to be added to the email list to receive notifications of upcoming Western Mass Historical Commission Coalition or Central Mass Historical Commission Coalition programs, please email Stacia Kaplanson, whose contact email is listed on the Preservation Mass website. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us. And this presentation will be up on Preservation Mass in the near future. So feel free to direct people or take another view of it yourself. Thanks again, everyone.